He hit her with a contempt fine right in front of everyone, but what Jasmine Crockett said next turned the entire courtroom around and left the judge without words. The courtroom was warmer than usual that day, not hot, just warm enough to make people shift. In their chairs, pull at their collars, something in the air made. You want to clear your throat even with nothing to say. Jasmine Crockett stood at the defense table, one hand resting on a stack of folders, the other by her side. Steady. Sharp, not a crease in her gray slacks, not a drop of sweat on her forehead. Her eyes locked on Judge Randall Forrester. The moment he raised his voice, the room tightened. "Ms. Crockett," he said, his tone strict. "This court does not allow political speeches, disguised. As legal arguments, you were already warned. If you continue this path, I will hold you in contempt." She did not react. "Your Honor, with all due respect, this is not politics. It is precedent, and I am asking this court to see that difference." Forrester leaned back in his chair, lips pressed into a line. He was known for two things, a short temper and a sharp memory. He looked at her like someone being told their favorite rule no longer applied. "You have practiced law long enough to know better," he said. $500 contempt of court. The fine landed in the room like a slop, a few gasps, soft murmurs. But Jasmine stayed still. The bailiff scribbled on his pad. The court clerk stopped and looked up. A young law student in the back whispered, "Did she just get fined for quoting case law?" Jasmine calmly cleared her throat. "Then I respectfully ask for the court's reason for the finesso. It may be added to the appeals record." Forrester blinked. He was not used to being questioned, at least not from the bench like this. He could often sense fear, but Jasmine showed none. Her tone was calm, eyes steady. Her voice didn't waver. "Excuse me?" he said, more like a warning than a question. "You fined me for contempt," she replied. "I am asking for the court's explanation so it can go into the record in case it needs review." He shifted in his seat, the silence in the room almost hummed. With tension a few feet away, the prosecutor Leland Briggs, a rule follower, flipped through his notes with deliberate slowness, as if to say, "Not my issue." He did not look up. "You are bordering on disrespect," the judge warned. "And you are bordering on blocking a valid defense," Jasmine replied, still calm, still clear. "I am not yelling. I am not giving speeches. I am quoting federal case law and asking this court to hear the facts. If that is contempt, then we have lost more than just $500. Someone in the gallery let out a long breath, a nervous chuckle, then silence returned. Judge Forrester looked at her for a long pause, his mouth opened like he was about to speak, but then stopped. "Move on," he finally said, "before I make it 1,000. But the shift in the room had already begun because something had changed. She had not shouted. She had not stepped back, and yet, without raising her voice, she had made everyone pay attention. The judge looked annoyed, but also slightly unsure. That rare moment when someone in power feels the ground shift beneath them and cannot tell if it is their own mistake or the person standing before them. Before he could take control again, Jasmine turned the page, and what came next would shake more than just the courtroom silence. 2 days earlier, Jasmine sat in a small corner office on the second floor of a Dallas law firm, not one of those tall glass buildings with city views and coffee machines, just a plain building with creaky floors and file cabinets that still needed keys. She was on the phone, pacing slowly in flats that had seen more courtrooms than fashion shows. "Who is the arresting officer?" she asked, tapping her pen on her notepad. "Officer Trent Walsh," said the voice on the line. "Pulled 6 protesters from a car outside the Northern Star Oil building, charged them with trespassing and unlawful assembly. Were they violent?" "Nope." One was a high school teacher. The rest were in their 20s. They were reading statements out loud, sitting on the steps. Jasmine stopped pacing. "Reading statements?" "Yeah, the whole thing's on video. Someone live-streamed it on Facebook." She ran her hand down her face. She had seen this before. Private security gets nervous, calls the cops. Charges are filed to scare people into silence. But this case felt messier. "I will take it," she said. "You sure no one else touched it?" "They're calling it a waste of court time. They have said that before." By the end of that day, she had 6 case files spread out on her desk, each protester charged with the same offense. Same arrest report, copied with only the names changed. No statements from the actual building employees, just a brief affidavit and a few low-quality screenshots. But one part stood out. Officer Walsh said he gave 3 loud verbal warnings before making the arrests, but in the video he barely finished the first. Warning before pulling someone to their feet that someone was Marissa Elkinsa, local art teacher, with cat-eye glasses and a sketch pad always in her purse in the video. She does not even glance up before Walsh grabs her by the wrist. Jasmine leaned back in her chair. The video paused on her screen. She knew this case would not grab headlines, but it still mattered. Not just because people got arrested for sitting and speaking, but because the system was relying on no one to notice. That is why she did not hesitate to step into court that morning. She had done her homework. Pulled city laws found 2 federal cases nearly identical to this one, but what she had not planned for was Judge Forrester. He was not only strict, but dismissive, the kind who thought protests were just noise and believed civil rights belonged in old books, not in live courtrooms. Before the hearing started, he barely looked her way or acknowledged her clients. When she introduced herself, he mumbled, "Let's keep this quick." Quick meant quiet. Quick meant no attention. Jasmine never looked for attention. She made arguments. At the defense table that morning, her clients sat beside her: Marissa, 2 college students, a postal worker, and a community gardener named Daryl, who had a heart condition and trouble standing. Long Jasmine glanced along the row of them. Looked threatening. They looked tired, uneasy, like people told that speaking up could cost them, and maybe it could, but not if she had anything to do with it. She quietly said, "Stay calm. I will speak for us." Marissa gently squeezed her hand under the table. "You always do," she whispered back, but Jasmine was not there just to speak. She was there to break down every false charge, and by the end even the judge would have to pay attention. When court resumed that afternoon, something in the room had shifted, not loudly, just more still. People leaned forward now, not away. They were not waiting for drama. They wanted to see what Jasmine would do next. Judge Forrester came in with his usual stiff walk and tight expression, but his eyes briefly moved toward her, just for a second. Quick, but Jasmine stood there before, the bench notes in one hand, the other resting on the table. Her voice did not need to be loud, it carried weight. "Your Honor," she began, "we are not here to argue over property lines or damage claims. My clients sat on concrete steps." They read out loud. "No force was used, nothing was broken. They did not block the entrance. They were arrested because someone disliked what they were saying." Forrester interrupted. "Miss Crockett, this is not a review of the officer's judgment. You are here to argue the motion to dismiss." "I am, Your Honor," she said calmly, "and the motion is grounded in the First Amendments, apported by Martin versus City of Stroud, and more recently, Holder versus Community Network." His eyes narrowed. That last case, Holder, was not well known, rarely cited, since it came from an appellate court in Indiana, but Jasmine had found an important link. "Your point?" he asked in a low voice. "In Holder, the court ruled that protesters outside a private office building could not be charged with trespass when the property was publicly accessible. Same layout here. The steps in front of Northern Star's headquarters are not gated. They are open to foot traffic and business visitors." The judge leaned back, arms folded. "So now we are using Indiana cases?" She nodded. "Not using, drawing a comparison. Because when multiple states respond the same way to peaceful gatherings, it becomes a pattern worth noting." Prosecutor Leland Briggs let out a loud sigh. "Your Honor, this is reaching. These individuals broke the law, plain and clear." Jasmine turned toward him. "Mr. Briggs, did you watch the video of the arrests?" He shifted slightly. "The department provided reports." "So you did not watch the video?" "That is not important." "With respect, it is. The arrest report claims Officer Walsh gave 3 warnings, but the video shows him barely giving one before. Grabbing Ms. Elkins by the arm, no crowd order, no speaker system, just his voice in a loud street. And he did not even finish that." Forrester flipped through the files in front of him, but paused halfway. His eyes stayed on one document longer than the rest. "Officer Walsh is not here to testify today?" "No, sir," Jasmine replied. "The department says he is on leave. Stress-related." Briggs cut in. "He is a decorated officer who made a mistake." Jasmine calmly interrupted. "But this is not about blaming him. It is about correcting what came from that mistake." For a moment, the room went quiet again. Forrester let out a slow breath through his nose. His face stayed the same, But the pause said more than his look ever could. He was thinking it through, not agreeing. Not yet, but listening, Briggs. Tried one last dig. She is turning this into a political act. Jasmine did not turn to him. This is not an act. This is my client's reality. They faced criminal charges for a silent sit-in on open steps. If that is the system doing its job, then we need to ask, who is it really working for? The silence after was not dramatics, it was uneasy. Forrester glanced again at the fine he had issued earlier that day. You could tell he was beginning to understand it was not just harsh. It was reactive, but what he did not know yet was that Jasmine had one last argument still to come. Jasmine turned to the last page in her notes, barely touching the paper, but her voice carried just what was needed. There is one more case. I want to add to the records, he said, scanning the courtroom without raising her tone. Donovan, V Metro PDN 9th Circuit. 2016 Judge Forrester raised an eyebrow. That one was dismissed on procedure. It was, Jasmine agreed. But the appellate court's wording in that opinion set a standard one that reflects what happened here. Briggs scoffed again, quoting from a case that never even advanced. I am not citing the results, she replied, turning to him. Still composed, I am pointing to how the court described police conduct during protests. On privately owned but publicly open space, the court warned against vague commands and reactive enforcement, which, Your Honor, is exactly what Officer Walsh did. Forrester leaned in, resting his elbows on the bench, now clearly more engaged. So you are saying a paragraph in a dismissed case should override Texas law? No, she replied. I am saying that law is not just about punishment. It is also about protection. And when we let weak cases slide through unchecked, we set a precedent for careless arrests. And before long, anyone standing outside holding a sign is treated like a threat, even if they are quietly reading from a notebook. On a sidewalk open to the public, Briggs folded his arms. He was losing grip, and he could feel it. But Jasmine kept going. She walked slowly toward the front and stopped near the jury box. My client Darrell has a heart condition. He sat during the protest because standing too long could send him back to the hospital. He said nothing, made no threats. The officer never asked anything, just grabbed him. Same with Marissa, pulled by her wrist like she was refusing, but she was not. She was reading a line from Dr. King. When he yanked her up, she paused and looked toward the judge. Your Honor, I understand this court sees more serious offenses, and I know there are heavier cases, but if our justice system cannot treat these moments with care moments, when people are punished for just being present, then what are we doing here? It went quiet again, but this time it was thoughtful, almost like everyone was reconsidering the whole thing. Judge Forrester looked down. He flipped through the arrest reports again. A line formed between his eyebrows. His fingers stopped at one report. Marissa. Elkins, Miss Elkins, he said. She stood up, nervous, voice lows. Sir, you are the one who was reading from a book when the officer arrested you? Yes, sir, a book of speeches. I did not move when he spoke, because I could not hear him properly. The street was loud. Forrester turned to Jasmine again. You say all of this is on video? Yes, sir. We submitted the video with timestamps comparing Officer Walsh's warnings to the arrest. You will see he begins pulling people just 4 seconds after his only warning. No speaker, no second notice. Forrester leaned back again, jaw tight, but his voice was more subdued now. And you are asking for all 6 charges to be dismissed? I am, on the grounds of wrongful arrest, denial of free speech, and abuse of police power. My clients used their constitutional right in a space open to the public, and they were punished only because someone did not like it. The judge said nothing, looked at the folder in front of him, and for a moment, Jasmine saw something, not regret exactly, but a shift, like he had just realized that the ground he trusted had a deep crack in it. He reached for his gavel, but did not strike it. Instead, he looked directly at her. I will take the motion under advisement. She gave a single, respectful nod. No smile, no sigh of relief, just stillness. Briggs did not say anything. Neither did the clerk, but the room felt different now, not only because of what had been said, but because no one was looking at Jasmine as if she was the issue anymore. But just as it seemed to settle, Judge Forrester opened the file one last time, and what he saw next changed the direction entirely. Judge Forrester flipped through the folder methodically, 1 page at a time, arrest records, witness statements, and other documents, until suddenly he stopped. His brow tightened. It was a small note near the back, an affidavit signed by a building's head of security from Northern Star. Jasmine had reviewed it twice already. She knew what was in it, this statement. Forrester said, lifting the paper carefully. "This is from the property manager?" "Yes, Your Honor," Jasmine answered. "His name is Gerard Blanche. He signed it the morning following the arrests. You submitted this?" Note was filed by the prosecution. Briggs blinked. Yes, it was part of the department's original submission." Forrester began reading aloud. "At the time of the protest, no entrances were blocked, and there was no physical damage. Protesters sat on the front steps and did not disrupt foot traffic or any business inside. The police were not called by property management, but responded after a phone call from a private tenant on the 5th floor. He stopped. The room was still, then read the line again. "Slower, police were not called by property management." Briggs shifted. "Your Honor, that does not mean the protest was allowed." "No," Forrester said, his tone firmer now. "But it does mean the officer did not act under guidance from the building's owner or staff. So the question is, why did he act so quickly?" He looked at Jasmine, and for the first time since the case began, his look was not irritated, it was thoughtful. She said nothing, letting the silence hold. Then he turned to Briggs again. "Did you ask Officer Walsh about this?" "No, sir. I reviewed the arrest reports, which do not match this affidavit." Briggs opened his mouth, then closed it again. Forrester turned. "To the bailiff, please display the video on the monitor." A few taps later, the footage started. The video was shaky but clear background sounds. Cars, some voices. Then Officer Walsh entered the frame, speaking quickly, but with no speaker or microphone. His words were hard to hear. You could clearly hear Marissa's voice instead, and "That is why the voices of the people cannot be silenced." Then his hand reached for her. Another protester stood frozen and was pulled next. No second instruction. Forrester leaned back again, his face unreadable. The room watched him, not the screen. Then he looked at Jasmine. "You wrote a memo on Holderview Community Network in law school." She blinked. "Yes, so do you know that?" He held up the affidavit, flipping to the final page. "Gerard Blanche mentioned your name. He said you helped one of his tenants in a bias case 7 years ago. Said you took apart the argument in court without raising your voice." Suddenly, the courtroom felt smaller. "He didn't mention that," Forrester said. "Why? I didn't think it mattered." He studied her closely for a few seconds. "You understand the law," he said, "and you apply it clearly, without theatrics. That is rare." Then he turned to Briggs. "I am dismissing all 6 charges for lack of cause for arrest and failure to prove unlawful assembly." Bang. The gavel hit the block. Gasped some shocked looks. Daryl dropped his head into his hands. Marissa let out a laugh that turned into a sob. Jasmine did not move. Her eyes stayed on the bench like something was still left. Forrester cleared his throat about the earlier contempt fine. "I'm removing it from the record." Silence again. "You made your point, Miss Crockett." She looked him in the eyes. "I was not trying to." He nodded slightly, as if it stung. But before anyone left the room, one more exchange was waiting just beyond those double doors, and it would not be from the judge. The wooden doors opened, and people slowly filed out, like they were not ready yet to return to everyday life. Jasmine exited, laster folder tucked under one arm. She said nothing. Not yet. Their clients gathered around her, quiet, relieved, emotional, a little dazed. The hallway outside was narrow with buzzing overhead lights, and every step echoed. Daryl leaned on the wall, hand over his chest, not in pain, just catching his breath. "You saved us," he whispered. "I really thought I was going to leave that place with a record just for sitting down." "You did not break the law," Jasmine said. "You made someone uncomfortable. That is not the same." Marissa stepped closer, her voice still a bit shaky. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How did you stay so calm in there when he fined you, when he cut you off?" "I would have lost it." Jasmine gave a small smile. "You cannot fight pressure with more noise. Judges do not respond to anger. They respond to structure, to clarity. I knew what I had, and I trusted it. But he was ready to shut you down," Marissa said. "He acted like you were wasting his time." Jasmine glanced back toward the courtroom doors. "He did not see me as a lawyer. Not in the beginning. Just someone talking too much in the background. So I gave him what he could not ignore. The law. No attitude. No show. Just facts. Lined up solid. The young law student from earlier stepped forward hesitantly. "Excuse me, Miss Crockett?" "Yes." He looked a little nervous. "I have seen your name before. In a dissent you wrote 2 years ago in a housing case. I go to UNT. Law, thank you. That was amazing in there." She softened. "It is not about being amazing, it is about showing up, prepared, even when no one thinks you should, especially then." Behind her, slow footsteps approached. Jasmine turned. It was Judge Forrester. Had no robe now. Just a shirt and tie, his jacket folded over one arm. He looked at her with something like respect, though not fully. He was still someone who held tight control. "I forgot about that housing case," he said, "until I saw your name again." Jasmine remained quiet. "You argued a rent control loophole in front of Judge Lassiter, right?" "I did. You won." She gave a slight nod. He let out a quiet breath. "Your approach is quiet, but it stays with you." "I remember now." Jasmine did not smile. That was never the point. The point was fairness. Forrester studied her. "You know, years ago I taught procedural law. I used to tell my students, do not get too creative with civil rights cases. The court does not care for speeches." She raised an eyebrow. "Do you still believe?" That a pause. "I am starting to think it matters who says it." That stayed in the air for a moment, not a compliment exactly, but a shift. Quiet recognition. Then he said something unexpected. "If you ever think about becoming a judge, you would be good at it." Jasmine did not look away. "I am not finished with this part yet." He nodded once. "Fair enough." Then he turned and walked off. Darryl looked at her. "Are you going to take that as a win?" She took a slow breath. "No, just a beginning." But the story was not over. Not yet. Not until someone younger, someone watching from the side, understood what they had just seen. Later that evening, Jasmine sat outside a small cafe on Swiss Avenue. The late sunlight stretched shadows across the pavement, and for the first time all day, she looked like she could breathe. Her blazer rested folded beside her. A glass of iced tea sat untouched. Across from her was Nico, a first-year law intern. Barely 2 months in, still holding more questions than answers. He had followed her from court without saying a word. Now his notebook was open, but his pen had not moved. "I do not get it," he finally said. "You could have fired back when he fined you, when he shut you down. Why didn't you?" She gave a dry smile. "Because once I make it personal, I lose control of the moment." "But it was personal," he said. "He disrespected you. He tried to undercut you." Jasmine stirred the ice in her glass. Still not drinking. "Yes, it was personal. But justice does not care about emotions. It only listens when you speak in its terms. He tried to trap me, so I gave him something solid, a legal structure with no holes. But he wanted to discredit you," Nico said. "You saw it. I see it all the time." That stopped. She leaned in slightly. "You ever seen someone try to lift a weight they were not ready for? They strain, they panic, they drop it. That is what happens when people try to carry injustice without the right tools." He stared at her. "That courtroom, it was not for showing off," she went on. "It was for shaping the law the right way. That judge had a hammer in his hand. He thought I was just another nail. But here is the thing. Hammers do not work on steel." Nico's eyes widened. "So you came in prepared," he said. "I came in strong," she answered. "Because sometimes you do not get another try. You get one moment to show people the truth, and if you waste it by shouting, they will only remember the noise." He looked down at his notebook. "I want to be that." "Good someday." "You will," she said. "But not by copying me. Be better than me. Study the law like a language you have not learned yet. Learn every part of it. And when the time comes that someone tells you you are out of line, you will not need to get louder. You will simply show your evidence." For a moment, the table fell silent. Then he looked up again. "Do you ever get tired of this?" She finally took a sip of her tea. "All the time," she said. "But I get even more tired of watching people lose, just because no one was there across the street." 2 teenage girls walked past, holding protest signs. One read, "We have the right to speak." The other, "We are not going anywhere." Nico saw them too. "They do not even realize what you just did for them." "They do not have to," she replied. They just need to know someone stood up for the rules meant to protect them. That is enough. She stood up, gathering her things. One day, she said, someone will look at you in court, the same way you looked at me today, and they will remember. What fairness sounds like, do not take that lightly. He nodded, silent again, his eyes carrying the weight of everything he had just witnessed. As Jasmine walked away, the sun dipped behind the edge of the buildings, and her shadow followed closely. Quiet, steady, sure, because sometimes the most powerful voices do not need to be loud. They just need to endure. If you believe in fairness, true fairness, the kind that stays calm but firm, share this story. Subscribe for more real-life moments that matter.